It's day 28. It's also June 2nd, 2019. And we are in Drain, Oregon. You ever wake up in the morning and ask yourself, what am I doing? And more importantly, why? Yeah, me too. Hi, my name's Craig, and this is my story. A story about life. Life out there. For visuals while listening, search Life Out There on your favorite social media platform or use the links in the podcast description. Wow, so it's actually fascinating to me, maybe even a little overwhelming that not quite a month in at this point, this still feels like a pretty awesome vacation. I keep wondering when it'll sink in that I don't have a house anymore. Well, okay, I have a house, I guess. It's just on wheels. And maybe all that has sunk in, and I'm just okay with it. The anticipation of all there is to see out there makes this all way too exciting to be anxious about anything, I guess. I mean, how many times in life will I have the opportunity to just walk or drive away from conventional thinking and into a foreign life and not be afraid? And yet, here I am, doing it. It's freeing, actually. It's exciting. The reality, in my mind, is this is living. I guess my point is, I still feel determined to run head on into this adventure, no looking back. I feel like maybe I'm figuring out that life on a high wire without a net, yeah, it can be scary. But it can also be pretty dang cool. And one thing I can see already is that just because I sold the house, that didn't mean that maintenance and fixing stuff went away. Figuring things out and fixing or making adjustments to the RV happen on a daily, sometimes hourly basis. Point being, some things in life, well, they just keep coming, albeit in different forms. Life is life. Maybe it's just a matter of choosing where you want to live it. For example, last night I noticed that the passenger side lights on the tow dolly for the car weren't working. The tail lights and brake lights worked, but the right turn signal on the dolly didn't work, even though the one on the RV did. Apparently above my pay grade, because I checked, cleaned connections, checked for broke, disconnected wires, whatever. Couldn't figure it out, so definitely on the list for a shop at our next stop. You know, kind of like calling a plumber on Monday morning when you couldn't get the sink unclogged the afternoon before. Dougie and Billie, they seem to be loving it. Dougie can't wait to jump out of the door each morning to run around and check out where we are, what might have changed from the last stop. Billie, his favorite has become when I can manage to find a spot far enough off the beaten track that he just gets to jump outside and go, tear off into the woods or the mountains. A little time outside without his harness, that always makes his day. And with big brother Dougie watching over him every step of the way, the two of those together always make my day. So, looking forward to a visit with friends and family, we would leave the coast at Reedsport and head into the Elk River Valley. Highway 38, also called the Umpqua Highway, winds its way deep into the valley, eventually ending some 60 miles or so at the south end of the Willamette Valley on I-5. A great deal changes as you leave the coast and head into the valley. First, the scenery. Driving along the Umpqua River provides scenic vistas at nearly every turn. The river scenery is backed by thick forested scenery and at times even rugged mountain cliffs. The occasional signs warning of potential rock slides gives you an instant sense of how rugged these mountains can be. A section of the highway is even designated as the Umpqua Scenic State Corridor. The deeper into the valley you drive, the more rugged the scenery, until it eventually opens up a bit into rolling mountains dotted with cattle ranches and farms as you get further away from the coastal range mountains. The next thing that changes? The temperatures, especially on this particular Sunday afternoon. Temps were already on the rise as we pulled into the Dean Creek elk viewing area, some 8 miles or so outside of Reedsport. By the time we'd passed through Scottsburg and into Elkton, it was nearly 100 degrees. When we pulled off at an old truck scale for lunch just outside Drain, it had hit 103 degrees. Not the Oregon I remember, I thought. But then, I'd never been, actually, to this part of Oregon. I would later learn that yes, these temps were unseasonably warm, even for the valley, and Oregon would be in for a hot summer that year. So let's back up a minute. The Umpqua River? The Umpqua River is a principal river of the Oregon coast, approximately 111 miles long. It's formed by the confluence of the North and South Umpqua Rivers near Roseburg. The river is known for its runs of Chinook salmon, sturgeon, and especially steelhead. The river and its tributaries flow almost entirely within Douglas County, which encompasses most of the watershed of the river from the Cascades to the coast. The beauty of the area, combined with the diversity, make it attractive to visitors from all over the world. Whether you're looking to fish, hike, kayak, or canoe, or even strap on a life jacket for some Class 3 river rafting, it's all on this river. Oregon's annual tourism revenue is estimated at around $10 to $12 billion annually, and it's a pretty sure bet that the Umpqua River Basin contributes its fair share to those numbers. Oh, and I mentioned pulling off into the Dean Creek elk viewing area. It's a pretty cool stop, an interpretive center with tons of information about the surrounding area and its wildlife. The reserve itself is home to some 100 head of Roosevelt elk. A few miles further in, we pass through Scottsburg, Oregon. It's a sort of a blink and you'll miss it kind of town. Today, some 260 folks call it home. And in fact, a good portion of what I did see looked pretty run down, even almost abandoned. But it didn't start that way for Scottsburg. Founded in 1850, it quickly became a thriving town with a bustling economy. There were two parts of the town: Lower Town at the head of the Tidewater on the Umpqua River, which became the site of business houses and mills, and the Upper Town, which was a distribution and shipping point for the mining regions and communities of southern Oregon. As many as 500 pack animals could be seen loading here at any given time. And then, two things happened. First, some of the businesses had already begun to transition out closer to the ports. And second, the Great Flood of 1862. The Great Flood was the largest flood in recorded history for California, Oregon, and Nevada, inundating the western United States and portions of British Columbia and even Mexico. The flood was caused by weeks of continuous rains and snows that began in Oregon in November 1861 and continued into January 1862. The event was capped by a warm, intense storm that melted the high snow load. The resulting snowmelt flooded valleys, inundated or swept away towns, mills, dams, flumes, houses, fences, even domestic animals, ruining a lot of fields. The storms caused approximately $100 million in damage, and that's 1861 dollars. After conversion, that would be equal to about $3.2 billion today. At least 4,000 people were estimated to have been killed in the floods in California alone, which was roughly 1% of the state's population at the time. Now, record keeping for the time makes it tough to find loss numbers specific to Oregon, but Scottsburg was devastated, and it never really recovered. Today, some 160 years later, it's a quiet little spot that tens of thousands drive through each year on their way to and from the Oregon coast. Next on Highway 38, Elkton, a quaint little town founded in 1850 on the lower Umpqua River. Its roots go deep into Oregon's past, but it's always been a quiet little spot nestled in the Oregon's coastal mountains overlooking the Umpqua River. In more recent years, the area has added vineyards and wineries to its list of accomplishments. So now, after a day of fishing, boating, or kayaking on the Umpqua, or hiking, biking, any one of a number of scenic areas, you can end the day at a wine tasting at one of Elkton's locally owned and operated wineries. Then it was on into Drain. We would spend several days exploring Drain, Yoncalla, Oakland, Elkton, and beyond. Drain is a city located in Douglas County, Oregon. The original town site of Drain was settled in 1847 by Warren Goodell, who received 320 acres as a donation land grant from the U.S. government. Goodell's claim was long and narrow in order to encompass as much of the valley's bottomland as possible. The claim was sold to Jesse Applegate in 1858. Jesse Applegate was an American pioneer from Kentucky. He first migrated to Missouri and later would lead a large group of settlers along the Oregon Trail to the Oregon Country. He would go on to become an influential member of Oregon's government and would help establish the Applegate Trail as an alternative route to Oregon. In 1861, Charles C. Drain would arrive in the area from the Midwest and purchase the land from Applegate. Charles Drain would plat the town site in 1872 and sell 60 acres to the Oregon and California Railroad for $1. A pretty shrewd businessman. It raised a lot of eyebrows at the time, but he knew that essentially giving the land away and attracting a railway depot to the area would bring prosperity and growth to the area, driving land values, and he was right. Within a decade, many homes, stores, and public buildings were constructed, and an overland stage route was established between Drain and Scottsburg. At the time, this was the only form of public transportation between the interior valleys and the coast. It provided a vital link from the railroad in Drain to the steam-powered paddle boats in Scottsburg. The railroad would continue to contribute to Drain's prosperity in the upcoming years and would be tied directly to the boom in the lumber industry. Not only was Drain on a major railway route connecting Portland with San Francisco, but in addition, the E.G. Whipple Mill and the Drain Plywood Company would soon open, contributing to the town's economic boom. In the early 1900s, the Southern Pacific Railway began construction of a route from Drain to the coast. But after spending nearly $1.5 million on the project, it was abandoned, and a line from Eugene to Coos Bay was built instead. There are a lot of stories out there about why the project was abandoned. Even some speculate on whether or not it was ever going to be completed in the first place. But instead started as a bluff to keep a major competitor of Southern Pacific out of the area. If you want to read more about that, just Google the Shoestring Railroad. More likely, though, the reality that the route would never be profitable enough to cover the total cost of install all the way through to Coos Bay, so the plan was abandoned and a more profitable route between Eugene and Coos Bay was established. Regardless of the reason, the loss of the route would strike a devastating blow to Drain's growth over time, and as more and more routes were diverted to more streamlined and profitable routes between the coast and the valley utilizing Portland, Salem, and Eugene facilities. The bad luck would just keep coming for Drain, when in 1903 and again in 1914 the town would fall victim to fires that would destroy most of the commercial buildings in the city. In 1881, Drain had a population of 500. After the devastation of the fires, combined with losing the railroad line to Eugene and a proposed telegraph plan fell through, Drain would never really recover economically. It would take nearly 40 years for the town's population to just get back to 500. I couldn't pinpoint the exact year the railway depot in Drain ceased operation, but all indicators point to around the same time as the second Drain fire devastated the town. What started out as the heart of the young settlement eventually faded into the past. Today, trains still run through Drain regularly, but no stops. Simply product, primarily lumber, to and from busier and larger depots further inland. In the years following World War II, the town would slowly grow to around 1,200, where it remains to this day. Today, Drain remains a quiet little town, but perfectly placed for the modern era. Nearly smack dab in the middle between Eugene, Springfield, and Roseburg, the area is well within commute distance, allowing folks to enjoy the small town life in Drain while working in the larger metro areas. Highway 38, which runs directly through the middle of Drain, just 6 miles from Interstate 5, brings thousands through the town each year on their way to a weekend getaway at the Oregon coast. The Oregon Department of Transportation reports that the annual daily average traffic count through Drain is 4,800, which means that over 1 million vehicles each year pass through Drain. I couldn't find a way to break down unique indicators or eliminate replications, meaning commuters or local traffic, but nonetheless, no matter how you break it down, a lot of people trek through Drain each year. And I wonder how many have any idea of the history they're driving through as they pass through a little place in Oregon called Drain. Another fun fact: since 1938, Oregon has held the #1 spot in the nation for soft lumber production. Today, it is an $18 billion a year industry for the state, employing nearly 80,000 people. Nearly all of this revenue and product come from the western side of the state, and in particular, Lane and Douglas counties. And smack dab in the middle of all this, that's where you'll find Drain. As for us, it was several days of hanging out with friends and family, meeting new folks, endless drives through the surrounding mountains and along the rivers and creeks, and tons of long walks. Just soaking in the beauty of the forested mountains that dominate this part of the state. Well done, Drain. Headed out of Drain? Next up? I don't know. But I wonder what we'll learn there. Turns out, this thing called life comes with a lot of rules. Maybe it's time to break a few. Because you can. No, seriously, you can.